You must remember that there is space for only one sovereign at a time. Not two, therefore. You cannot exist as the monarch does. The metaphorical rug of security can be rapidly pulled out from under you at any given moment. You might tell yourself it won't happen to us. But when it ultimately does, it will certainly lead you to some rather unpleasant situations. What if I were to tell you that at this very instant, the British monarchy is enduring its most explosive crisis in over 4 centuries? A devastating situation that could permanently redefine the crown? In a move absolutely unforeseen by everyone, but which many sensed was secretly developing. King Charles III has privately communicated his intent to divorce Queen Camilla. Yes, you heard that correctly. He plans to separate from the reigning monarch and his queen consort. The couple that navigated decades of public outrage, scandal, and the persistent shadow of Diana are finished. However, this is not merely the dissolution of a marriage, it concerns betrayal, covert communications, deliberate manipulation, and a shocking scheme to reconstruct royal history itself, including the legacy of Princess Diana. For the first time in the modern era, a sitting king is preparing to sever the crown's most private bond. And what exactly triggered this unprecedented decision? The answer will undoubtedly leave you stunned. Remain with me, because what you are about to uncover extends far beyond simple palace intrigue. It involves power, deceit, and a royal reckoning that alters everything. But first, let me transport you inside the room where the royal bombshell was dropped. Picture this scene. It is exactly 9:15 on a damp London morning. Behind the imposing entrance of Clarence House, an emergency session has been covertly called. Who is present? The king's most trusted legal counselors, 2 senior courtiers whose faces are pale with tension, and the king's private secretary, clutching a folder labeled in bright red, "Confidential Domestic Action." The atmosphere is heavy, you could hear a pin drop. Then, King Charles III, visibly shaking, his voice strained under the gravity of his words, delivers the sentence that will resonate throughout history. I intend to separate from Queen Camilla. Can you visualize that precise moment? The profound silence that must have ensued. Witnesses report his hand was trembling as he spoke, his exhausted, red eyes barely meeting the gaze of his advisors. This was not a quick decision. This was a man at the brink of emotional collapse, forced to select between his wife and his crown. And here is the most astonishing detail. Only a very select few had been briefed in advance: Prince William, Princess Anne, and the Lord Chamberlain. That's all. No formal announcement, no press conference, simply a controlled, contained explosion behind closed palace doors. According to one senior advisor who was present, Charles uttered a statement that will haunt everyone who heard it. This has become untenable. The trust is broken. Now, you might be asking what could possibly compel a king to divorce his queen. We are talking about a man who dedicated 3 decades to defending Camilla, who withstood public hostility, who risked his reputation, who slowly, meticulously reconstructed her image from a royal mistress to the queen consort. What could shatter that connection so completely? The answer is contained within a dossier. A damning intelligence report delivered just 8 days prior to that pivotal meeting compiled by internal palace investigators. It detailed unauthorized activities, secret communications, and media manipulation linked directly to Camilla. It wasn't merely indiscretion, an insider whispered. It was manipulation disguised as strategy. And when Charles read that report, when he saw the undeniable proof of his own wife's actions behind his back, something inside him shattered. This incident marks the first royal divorce of a sitting sovereign in over 400 years. Consider that fact. Not since the reign of Henry VIII has a reigning monarch taken such an action. And we all know how that concluded. The monarchy has survived numerous challenges before. Edward VIII's abdication in 1936. Charles and Diana's disastrous split in 1996. But this situation is fundamentally different. It arises at a time when the crown is already under intense public scrutiny, when faith in the institution is hanging by a thread. For Charles, this juncture is not just personal, it is historic, constitutional, and existential. But what precisely did Camilla do? What information was contained in that intelligence report that propelled the king past his breaking point? Let's delve into the betrayal that broke the crown. It began innocently. Or so it seemed. Palace aides were conducting routine review of press inquiries. A standard procedure. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then, something drew their attention. A series of unusually detailed questions from a well-known royal biographer. The questions were too precise, too critical, too knowledgeable. Red flags were immediately raised. Following discreet inquiries, and let me assure you, when palace security begins an investigation, they are thorough. They uncovered an explosive truth. Queen Camilla had been in direct contact with this author. And this was not just a casual conversation. This biographer was reportedly working on a new book intended to entirely reframe the royal narrative. To rewrite history itself. Early drafts of this biography allegedly included altered, unfavorable depictions of Princess Diana, Prince William, and Princess Catherine. Can you believe that? Diana, the globally adored people's princess, was being negatively portrayed, while Camilla was depicted as a misunderstood, modernizing figure who had been unfairly victimized. It gets worse. Investigators also uncovered records of 3 private meetings between Camilla and a prominent foreign media executive. These meetings, entirely absent from official royal schedules, occurred over a 6-week period at an undisclosed property in Mayfair, one of London's most exclusive districts. What precisely were they discussing in these secret gatherings? A palace in revolt. Queen Camilla now finds herself at the epicenter of a crisis unlike anything witnessed in recent royal history. Buckingham Palace, typically a bastion of order and exactitude, is instead unraveling from within. What started as faint whispers in the back corridors has escalated into an overt act of defiance. A staff mutiny that endangers the monarchy's very foundations. Insiders reveal that loyalty among palace servants, once automatic and unquestioning, has fractured. A growing number are refusing to serve the queen consort. And this silent uprising shows no indication of subsiding according to those closest to the royal household's internal workings. The protest is not random. It is believed to be a direct reaction to what staff are describing as deliberate humiliations directed at Catherine, Princess of Wales. These were not isolated occurrences but a sequence of actions that have created wounds too deep to be overlooked. The outcome is a quiet yet potent rebellion, enacted not with shouting or banners, but through small, persistent acts of resistance. Initially, the signs were nearly imperceptible. An attendant who once stood ready at Camilla's side would suddenly excuse themselves just as she reached for a drink. A trusted butler of decades would disappear from the room the moment she entered. Doors that should have instantly opened remained closed just long enough to make her presence awkward. Afternoon tea would arrive late. Evening wine would be missing altogether. Tasks once performed with military precision were now intentionally delayed, disrupted, or abandoned. For a royal household where service operates with clockwork precision, such disruptions are not simple accidents, they are statements. It's a rebellion of 1,000 small cuts, explained a former footman still in contact with current staff. No single mistake can get you dismissed. But when dozens act the same way, the message is unmistakable. Respect is gone. And without respect, she has nothing. The chatter filtering through the kitchens, corridors, and servant quarters revealed the depth of the injury. Maids whisper of an unforgivable betrayal. Footmen quietly characterized the queen consort's treatment of Catherine as beyond redemption. Even experienced attendants, those who had endured the previous divorces, scandals, and storms that shook the House of Windsor, confessed. This moment feels different. One elderly royal family member is reported to have spoken in a hushed but firm voice. She crossed a line with the princess. There's a line you cannot cross. That boundary, once sacred and unstated, has been breached, and everyone in the palace understands the significance. Staff no longer need to articulate their reasons. The reference to the incidents involving Catherine is sufficient. No one wishes to discuss them openly, but every servant is aware of the details. The collective silence surrounding these events only intensifies their meaning, fueling the sense that something irreversible has occurred. For the monarchy, this is more than an internal inconvenience. Senior aides concede that palace operations are grinding to a halt. The atmosphere has turned toxic, and the family faces its most severe internal crisis in a generation. So, how did a single act of humiliation ignite talk of collapse, leaving the monarchy's very survival hanging by a fragile thread? Stay tuned. The weight of a son's words when Prince William stood before the cameras. His voice was steady, but the world could sense the pressure behind it. Every word seemed to carry the entire burden of the crown, the family, and the nation watching from every corner of the globe. "My father's condition is stable," he said gently, "but his illness is incurable. We are cherishing the time we have together." The ensuing silence was heavier than thunder. It was not just the confirmation of a rumor. It was the acknowledgement of a painful truth too difficult to conceal outside Buckingham Palace. Grief and disbelief intertwined in the air. Thousands gathered, shoulder to shoulder in the chill of a gray afternoon, clutching flowers, candles, and phones that replayed the moment repeatedly. Some prayed quietly. Others simply gazed at the palace windows, hoping for movement, a shadow, anything. Reporters lined the mall like sentinels. Cameras fixed on the balcony that had witnessed countless royal waves, now concealed behind velvet curtains. Across oceans, headlines erupted. News anchors' tones shifted from speculation to sorrow. The words, incurable, and cherishing, echoed across time zones. Two words that redefined how the world viewed their monarch for months. There had been murmurs. King Charles, diagnosed with cancer in early 2024, had continued to perform his duties, attending meetings, greeting ambassadors, and preserving the public calm that characterized his reign. But those who were close enough to observe him privately noticed the change, the slower movements, the extended pauses, the fatigue that no public smile could hide. It was not the first time the king had faced hardship with such quiet dignity. In his younger years, Charles represented strength and resolve. He rose before dawn, rode for hours through the cold Scottish air, and found solace in the straightforwardness of soil and saddle. His dedication to polo and the countryside was legendary, not for leisure but as a demonstration of endurance. To him, health was discipline, and resilience was duty, but time, in its relentless progression, began to test that discipline. Surgeries and injuries arrived in waves. The knee operation in 1998. A hernia repair in 2003. The minor procedures that followed in later years. Each time, he emerged smiling, shaking hands with nurses, and waving to photographers, determined to show that the body could weaken without surrender. Yet, those nearest to him began to sense a quiet transformation, a deeper contemplation on fragility, on legacy, on the limits of strength itself. Now, as William confronted the cameras, that legacy seemed to stand behind him, proud, weathered, unbroken. The king who had once played through pain now inspired a son who spoke through heartbreak. The monarchy has always symbolized endurance, about maintaining composure no matter the difficulty. But this time, even endurance came at a cost. And as the palace remained still beneath the November sky, Britain waited, suspended between gratitude and sorrow, wondering how much longer the silence would last. But when the silence finally breaks, will it signify the conclusion of a reign, or the commencement of a reckoning within the crown? Stay tuned. Legal proceedings underway just 72 hours after King Charles's private declaration. The Royal Legal Council convened an emergency session to commence the unprecedented process of dissolving a monarch's marriage. The lead solicitor, Sir Gavin MacLeod, one of Britain's most highly respected constitutional lawyers, has been tasked with navigating legal territory that has not been explored in centuries. The terms being drafted are extremely complex. They must address titles, living arrangements, access to royal finances, public responsibilities, and implications for the succession. This is more than a divorce, it is a constitutional conundrum with no modern precedent. In fact, it is the first time since the Royal Marriages Act of 1772 that legal advisors have interpreted divorce proceedings for a reigning sovereign. The current draft proposes that Camilla retain the title Queen Consort Emerita, a ceremonial designation that sounds significant but carries absolutely no political authority or succession rights. It is essentially a title without power, a name without meaning. More importantly, Camilla would be stripped of access to Duchy of Cornwall funds, the vast estate that provides income to the royal family. She would also be removed from crown estate privileges, severing her connection from the financial infrastructure that supported her royal lifestyle. Her housing arrangement would be permanently fixed at Raymil House, which, critically, is not an official royal residence. She would reside there as a private citizen, not as royalty. Perhaps most consequential of all, The travel funding and staff support currently provided through the sovereign grant would cease within 90 days of the finalized separation. In practical terms, Camilla is being systematically cut off from every material benefit of being queen consort, but there is another clause being drafted. One that speaks to the profound distrust now permeating this situation. Palace legal teams are crafting a strict non-disclosure provision that would prevent Camilla from publishing or contributing to any books, articles, films, or media projects that reference the royal family without explicit pre-approval. Financial penalties for any breach could reach text sterling $5 million. This clause was reportedly insisted upon by Prince William himself. As one source close to his communications team phrased it, "No more shaping history to suit her agenda." Charles, according to aides, is cooperative but emotionally fragile throughout this process. He has been present for legal briefings, but his focus remains split between duty and personal devastation. He has made one specific request: that all proceedings conclude before the royal tour season begins in March. He wants this resolved, finalized, and behind them so the monarchy can reset its public image without the continuous distraction of personal scandal. This isn't just a legal undoing. One insider noted, "It's the final chapter of a story that began in the shadows over 50 years ago." But while lawyers meticulously prepared documents in silence, the outside world erupted with reaction. In the court of public opinion, the verdict was swift, and Diana's memory returned like thunder through the halls of Windsor. Public reaction: the announcement, or rather the leak, of Charles and Camilla's impending separation caused an immediate cultural earthquake. Within hours, the hashtag Diana was right began trending across 48 countries. It dominated headlines from London to Sydney, from Toronto to Mumbai. Social media exploded with vindication, anger, and a collective sense of, "We told you so." Videos of Diana's famous 1995 Panorama interview, where she delivered that chilling, unforgettable line, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," were reposted over 30 million times in just 3 days. It was as if the world had collectively pressed rewind on history. And this time, Diana's truth was echoing without resistance, without distortion, without anyone attempting to suppress it. Opinion polls conducted by YouGov just 24 hours after the news broke revealed staggering numbers. 81% of Britons supported the King's decision to separate. Even more tellingly, 67% believed Camilla should be fully removed from all royal titles. News outlets, typically cautious, diplomatic, and measured in their coverage of royal matters, published bold editorials proclaiming this moment as Diana's posthumous vindication. Newspapers that had once criticized Diana, that had blamed her for the marriage breakdown, were now celebrating her as a truth-teller silenced too soon. Even the BBC, which had been criticized for exploiting Diana during the Bashir interview controversy, aired a tribute documentary within 3 days of the announcement. The message was unmistakable. The People's Princess had been right all along. Public calls began emerging for the restoration of Diana's honors. MPs from both major parties suggested the idea of declaring August 31st, the date of her tragic death in 1997, a national day of remembrance. A commemorative statue proposal, long stalled by internal royal disputes and political hesitation, was suddenly fast-tracked with new public funding. Diana's image was being rehabilitated, not just culturally but officially. For William and Harry, still estranged, still navigating their own complicated relationship, this moment represented a unique point of convergence. While Harry remained publicly silent, sources say he privately sent a message to William. "Just a few words," she warned us. "You're doing the right thing." The global sympathy flooding toward Diana's legacy reshaped not just the narrative of this divorce but the entire royal story spanning decades. The woman once labeled a problem had become the pillar, the moral center, the standard by which all others would be judged. And Camilla, once slowly, painfully rehabilitated through years of careful public relations, was collapsing under the weight of her own past. Inside the palace, the message was clear. The public had chosen its side. Now, the firm had to act quickly to adapt, to restructure, to demonstrate to the world that they heard the message loud and clear. or risk being consumed by the past they had spent so long attempting to suppress. The royal household restructures with the monarchy shaken by internal betrayal and external turbulence. The Lord Chamberlain's office implemented an emergency structural review. The changes were swift, decisive, almost ruthless. Within 1 week, over 22 staff members were reassigned, most notably from Camilla's communications and private secretary teams. Her personal office within Buckingham Palace, the physical space that represented her institutional presence, was shuttered. Its nameplate was quietly removed. No announcement, no ceremony, just erasure. In its place, a new division was established under William's chief of staff. The symbolism was impossible to miss. Influence was being transferred from consort to heir. From Camilla's vision to William's future. Two of William's most trusted advisors, Simon Case and Rebecca Priestley, were promoted to positions within King Charles's planning unit. This effectively merged the operational spheres of father and son, establishing a unified command structure. This marked a profound change in how the monarchy operates. Charles retains ceremonial oversight, the crown, the appearances, the constitutional role, but the actual running of the monarchy now flows through William. As one insider put it, the monarch is still Charles, but the monarchy now runs through William. Several forthcoming high-profile events were reorganized to emphasize royal stability and the family's trusted core. Princess Anne was confirmed to lead the Commonwealth Invoice Dinner, a prestigious diplomatic event that would traditionally have included the Queen Consort. Princess Catherine was tapped to host the International Children's Summit, a role originally earmarked for Camilla. Kate's involvement sends a powerful message about who the institution trusts to represent its values. Prince Edward and Sophie were integrated into more central ceremonial roles, forming a visible core of trusted bloodline royals. Camilla's absence, once unimaginable, once meticulously managed and explained, is now simply protocol. Expected, normal. Perhaps the most symbolic change of all involved the royal family portrait gallery inside Buckingham Palace. The portraits were quietly rearranged. Camilla's image, once prominently placed next to Charles, was moved to a much less conspicuous position, tucked away where few would notice. And in its place, a full-length portrait of Diana, originally unveiled discreetly in 2022, was relocated beside images of William, Kate, and their children. It was more than optics, it was a declaration. The monarchy is returning to its foundations. One built not on preserving controversial titles or protecting problematic figures, but on trust, service, and the will of the people. But structure alone does not guarantee stability. Even as the palace prepared itself for this new era, one massive question loomed over everything. A question that could redefine the British monarchy more dramatically than anything previously discussed. Would Charles himself remain on the throne? Can the crown survive another scandal? This divorce marks the second time in King Charles III's life that one of his marriages has collapsed under intense global scrutiny. But this time is fundamentally different. This time, he wears the crown in the face of unprecedented personal embarrassment and institutional crisis. Whispers of abdication have begun circulating, not just in tabloids but inside Parliament, in private clubs, and in government offices. While no official indication has been given, several aides privately believe Charles is considering stepping aside by 2026. Citing both crushing emotional strain and declining public confidence, the constitutional ramifications would be enormous. If Charles were to abdicate, it would trigger a rapid transition to Prince William as king and Catherine as queen consort. A move that recent polling suggests would be overwhelmingly supported by the British public. In fact, an Ipsos poll shows 73% of respondents would support a controlled succession within the next 2 years. That's not merely majority support. That's a mandate. Quiet preparatory meetings have already occurred between the Archbishop of Canterbury, senior cabinet officials, and Kensington Palace. They are not openly planning for abdication, but they are certainly preparing for the possibility. Whether Charles chooses to remain or step aside, the monarchy itself has undergone irreversible transformation. Camilla's downfall has redrawn the boundaries of legitimacy within the institution. The old narrative of forgiveness, second chances, rewritten history, and media management has completely collapsed. What remains is a monarchy rebuilt on 3 core pillars: bloodline, duty, And public will Diana's legacy is no longer just a shadow hanging over the family. It has become the standard by which everyone is judged. The measuring stick of authenticity and honor. And William? He is no longer merely a prince in waiting, he is a sovereign in spirit. The embodiment of what the monarchy needs to become. For Camilla, there is no way back, her role is finished. Her image dismantled. Her legacy, such as it was, lies in ruins. For Charles, the choice is agonizingly simple yet impossibly difficult. Preserve the throne through succession or attempt to salvage personal dignity while standing alone at the summit. The days of palace compromises, of meticulously managed scandals, of public relations rehabilitation campaigns, of protecting the indefensible are over. A new chapter has commenced. And with it, the House of Windsor has been reborn, under fire. Through scandal. But perhaps finally on the right side of history, the turning of the crown. It commenced as a perfectly ordinary London morning. The kind the city is known for. A cool mist hung in the air. The sky wore its typical shade of silver grey. And the murmur of routine life enveloped Buckingham Palace. The royal guards stood firm in their scarlet coats. Their faces as still as stone. The palace clock struck its familiar chime, echoing across the courtyard with crisp precision. Inside, courtiers moved through the marble halls, their calm footsteps blending into the quiet rhythm of duty. By all appearances, it was just another royal morning. But at precisely 9:47 a.m., everything changed. It began as a low sound. A faint whisper that slipped through the palace corridors like a draft. Initially, no one wanted to believe it. A butler paused mid-step. A maid dropped her tray. And an aide stared blankly at the floor. The stillness that followed was almost surreal. Then, the words that no one ever anticipated were spoken aloud, trembling and sharp. The king has been taken ill. In an instant, the palace that had always seemed unshakable became a hive of chaos. Guards who normally moved with ceremonial grace began running. The golden gates, symbols of elegance and tradition, clanged shut with urgency. Motorcades appeared out of nowhere. Black cars speeding through the courtyard as doors slammed and voices rose in confusion. The air buzzed with tension. Telephones rang non-stop. Messages were whispered from one trembling hand to another. The calm had been replaced by something far darker, the unmistakable pulse of fear. Behind those centuries-old stone walls, a storm had begun to gather by midday. The world received its first glimpse of that storm. The official royal statement arrived, brief, cold, and cryptic. His Majesty is under medical supervision following complications from treatment. That was all. No photographs of reassurance, no smiling doctors, no royal wave from a hospital balcony, just a single line. And then silence. But that silence was deafening across Britain. It echoed through living rooms, offices, and crowded streets. News anchors stumbled over their words. Reporters camped outside the palace gates. And millions of people whispered the same haunting question. What's happening to the king? The great halls, once filled with laughter and ceremony, were now silent but for the echo of hurried footsteps and the soft hum of prayers whispered by anxious hearts. Outside, the crowd grew larger, pressed against the gates, faces pale with worry and curiosity. Candles began to appear on the pavement, small flickering lights in the increasing dusk. And within those palace walls, history was holding its breath inside the palace. The atmosphere grew heavier with every hour. The staff moved like ghosts, speaking in hushed tones, afraid that even the walls might be listening. They knew what the public did not, that this was not a routine illness. Not a passing faint or a fever. It was serious, terrifyingly serious. The king, the man who had waited his entire life for the throne, now lay battling to remain upon it. The crown that had once symbolized triumph now felt like a burden too heavy to bear as the day transitioned to evening. The skies above London seemed to mirror the mood inside the palace, grey, heavy, and waiting for the rain to fall. The monarchy had endured wars, scandals, and storms before, but never this, never such a sudden, intimate fear, because this was not about politics or power, it was about a man, frail and mortal beneath the weight of his crown. The day that began with calm dignity had ended in trembling uncertainty. The golden age of the king, so long anticipated, now hung by a thread. And as midnight approached, one truth became clear to everyone who whispered in the shadows. The fate of the crown rested on the beating heart of one man. And that heart was faltering. How did Prince William find the courage to confirm the tragic news? How had Charles been coping with the crown before the illness? What were the silent struggles he faced behind the scenes? Let's discover Elizabeth's vanished legacy. Princess Anne has never been one to moderate her words or conceal her feelings. For decades, she has maintained a reputation as the most direct of the Windsors. A woman who speaks plainly, who values loyalty above appearances. And now, in the aftermath of her mother's passing, that steel has ignited into fire. Her confrontation with Queen Camilla was not solely about sparkling heirlooms, it concerned legacy, history, and the very foundation of what the monarchy purports to represent. The storm began quietly, deep inside Windsor Castle. Following Queen Elizabeth II's death, royal archivists adhered to tradition, commencing the solemn task of cataloguing the late monarch's possessions. This was a process that had been repeated after the deaths of kings and queens for centuries, a meticulous accounting of what was left behind, what belonged to the crown, and what had been personal. But this time, something was amiss. As the archivists moved through the vaults, they discovered gaps, jarring absences where priceless relics should have been. The discovery rapidly spread among a select few, but no one dared utter a word publicly. At first, Buckingham Palace attempted to suppress the whispers. Officials declined comment, locked doors, and enforced silence. But rumors traveled quickly in royal corridors, and they soon reached the one person least likely to let them rest: Princess Anne. Everywhere she turned, the murmurs followed: missing jewels, vanishing pieces, explanations that were thin and unconvincing. And for a woman who has dedicated her life to defending her mother's memory, this was intolerable. The jewels in question were not mere decorations, they were pieces woven into the narrative of Britain itself. One was a diamond flower brooch, first given to Elizabeth by Queen Victoria on the eve of her coronation. A gift symbolizing continuity and duty. That brooch had disappeared without a trace. Another was the renowned sapphire and diamond necklace, an iconic treasure Elizabeth wore on state occasions, a piece that shone as a silent promise of the Commonwealth's resilience. Now that, too, was gone. These were not just precious stones. They were tangible fragments of the monarchy's soul. To lose them was to lose the thread connecting one reign to the next. Without them, it was as if someone had torn out chapters from the national story for those inside the palace. Panic was the only response. Orders were issued with brutal clarity. Silence must be absolute. No leaks, no acknowledgement, no hint of scandal reaching the outside world. But silence has never been Anne's way. When she confronted Camilla, it was with a calm exterior concealing a controlled fury. Her words were precise, but they carried the weight of a lifetime of loyalty to her mother. She was not there to protect reputations or shield an institution already scarred by crisis. She was there to demand the truth. To Anne, these jewels were not possessions to be hoarded or misplaced. They were living symbols of Elizabeth's 70 years on the throne, reminders of sacrifice, service, and endurance. And in her view, their disappearance was nothing short of betrayal. So, what deeper betrayal could shake a dynasty more? Missing jewels or shattered trust within its walls. Keep watching the vault in the shadows. The breakthrough arrived not with fanfare or noise, but in a hushed, urgent voice that carried the weight of danger. The message reached Anne outside the castle walls, far from the marble corridors where whispers had begun to tighten like a noose. It was a voice she had not heard in years, Camilla's former personal assistant. Her tone was measured, every word chosen with the care of someone diffusing an explosive device. This was not idle gossip or speculation. What she carried was far more dangerous. She carried proof. With deliberate calm, the former aide revealed the existence of something that should never have existed at all: a hidden vault. Not in the archives of Windsor or the guarded repositories of government,